Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the PFN Scouting Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Miller, joined, as always, by an absolute rock star, Ian Cummings, my co-host. And today we are going to be talking about the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, okay? The two big bowls. And there are other bowls, but we really like these two bowls. It's where all the biggest names end up going. And listen, Shrine Senior Bowl, there is obviously a rivalry between the two. They are taking place pretty much at the same time. I believe the Shrine Bowl game is on Thursday, and then on Saturday is the Senior Bowl game, if I remember correctly. It's like February 1st and February 3rd. They're always fighting, jockeying for position and seeing who they can get. We used to see Shrine guys get called up to the Senior Bowl. I don't know if that's really the dynamic that we have anymore, because there are some big names at Shrine this year. We're going to get to all of that. But first, as always, I have to ask, Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and I can tell you and all the listeners can probably tell you're doing very good as well. He got to watch 5 hours of tape yesterday, so that's like Dalton, getting an extra shot of coffee or whatever. That's what he needs, right? So that's the fun stuff. But yeah, there's 3 bowls I like: my Chipotle Bowl, the Senior Bowl, and the Shrine Bowl, and we got 2 of those coming up. So it's gonna be fun to kind of.
I gotta ask, because I haven't been able to go recently. Obviously, I'm a little bit far away. Last time I went to Chipotle, because it used to be a big part of my diet. Used to love Chipotle, but I feel like Chipotle fell off a little bit. Is it still kind of falling off? Like, do I have to go and worry about getting a bacterial disease when I go there? Because if I don't have to worry about that, I don't know if I want it.
I'll say I think it probably depends on the location for that. The location that I go to in mid-Michigan, I've never had any issues with that. I don't think it's fallen off. No, I mix things up a little bit, get 1 scoop of chicken, 1 scoop of steak, right? But I think you mix it up, you kind of vary it. I think you can kind of steer clear of falling in
do
that
you ever get
a little bit.
I got to ask, because you obviously get double meat, because you say I want a scoop of chicken and I want a scoop of steak, but have you ever said, I want double chicken or I want double steak, but what you really have to do is say, I want a scoop of chicken. And then when they're done scooping that chicken, you ask for another scoop of chicken. Because if you just ask for 2 scoops, some of those high schoolers are going to scam you out of protein. Anyways, we got to get to talking football. And where exactly do you want to start? I think we probably go with Senior Bowl first and then hit Shrine last. And on the docket here, I mean, we could start anywhere, but we might as well start with the prospects to watch for the Senior Bowl. And if we're going to be talking about the Senior Bowl and we're going to be talking about prospects, we got to talk about 2 of my favorite draft prospects in this class. 2 guys from Texas A&M, the Aggies, defensive tackle McKinley Jackson, and wide receiver Aniyah Smith. And we can also add on T'Vondre Sweat, so we can talk about those 2 nose tackles for a minute. Obviously, you put down McKinley Jackson here, and you said you're welcome in parentheses. I added Aniyah Smith just because I love him as a player. Yeah. And he's kind of that quick, jittery player that does really well usually in the 1v1s that we see. But with McKinley Jackson and T'Vondre Sweat, kind of the 2 big nose tackles in this class. First of all, I got to ask, what do you think Sweat's ceiling is? Because I watched and I saw yesterday on Twitter somebody say that they liked his tape more than they liked Jordan Davis's tape. And he won't test like Davis. We know that. But liked his tape more. You shook your head. You're not there, are you?
It's tough because I think, Sweat's a really good player. He really is. Mm-hmm. I mean, in run defense too, I think that's kind of where he makes his money right now, is just eating up those double teams and those combo blocks. And he's got great energy in pursuit, great urgency. The motor is definitely really impressive with him. But I think just looking back to Jordan Davis, man, the testing numbers, that's all you really need to have that confirmation. His athleticism was absurd, right? that investment that you were making was unmatched. That's one chance in like 10, 15 years that you get a player like that who runs a 4.7 at like 6'6", 330, 340, right? So it's one of those things where, that aspect of it, I think, put him on a tier above, right? And at the same time too, I think T'Vondre Sweat, I honestly like McKinley Jackson's pass rushing upside a little more. I think Jackson is maybe a little more energized as a mover, a little bit more explosive, right? A little bit more compact. Devondre Sweat is around 6'4", 340. The dude is an absolute black hole. But as good as he is with his motor and his urgency, and he is athletic enough to be a pass rushing force, I think there is a little bit of a capped ceiling there. So I really like his tape. He's more of a top 75 guy for me, which, I mean, if you're looking for if you're adjusting for positional scarcity too, could easily see him going in the top 50. But Jordan Davis, I'm not there because I don't think he's quite that athletic for his size. So I think it's going to be really fun to see those two nose tackles alongside one another, because they have some verified measurements on those Senior Bowl graphics that they've been releasing. And I know I sent it to you yesterday or 2 days ago. But McKinley Jackson was around 6'1", 5'8", 320, and almost 34-inch arms. Like, if you were going to build a nose tackle in a lab, that is what you would build them like. Like that is exactly how you would kind of, put it together. So I think those two guys, I think they're a lot closer than people let on. I think they're both very good prospects, but I think we're going to get another chance to kind of split those hairs and really delineate where they stand in relation to one another today, or at this.
I think when you look at somebody like McKinley Jackson being that stout, it really does remind me a little bit of Texas defensive lineman. Why can't I think of his name right now? He was with the Seattle Seahawks. Now he's with the Buffalo Bills. He's not really playing for the Buffalo Bills, but he's on the football team. Oh, why can't I think of him? He was like 5'11". Everybody loved him.
Poona Ford.
Yep. Jesus. See, this is where my brain is broken. My brain is broken because Poona Ford was like one of my favorite players years ago in the NFL draft. Let's get to a quarterback. Let's talk about Michael Pratt, because I have some opinions on Michael Pratt.
While we're on quarterback, I feel like we should probably spend a little bit of time on the Senior Bowl quarterback group in general, right?
Yeah,
because I think
I like that.
It's a lot of good quarterbacks. I mean, at the end of the day, you got Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Hang on, I'm gonna pull up the full list, but
pull up the full roster.
Yeah. So I'm scrolling down here. You got,
and we've talked quite a bit about Bo Nix and Michael Penix, but seeing those guys there, and honestly, when it comes down to the Senior Bowl, it's really tough to like win or lose as a quarterback at the Senior Bowl on the field. It's more so what happens in interviews, especially with them speaking to teams. But we've seen quarterbacks improve their draft stock on the field as well. So if you are able to go there in a situation where you are surrounded by other top tier quarterbacks and you're able to display your physical tools at a level that is a tier higher than the rest of those guys, it makes a big difference, because when you're watching tape, you're not watching guys side by side. You don't get to see this guy throw and then this guy throw. You're saying, oh, well, it looks like Penix has some pretty good arm strength, but then you watch both of them throw a deep in or a deep out, and then you really can see side by side whose arm is more lively. So I think that is one thing that Senior Bowl practices, something that's really important when it comes to being able to see the physical tools beside one another.
Yeah, you get to see that zip in person, and you get to compare them side by side, rep after rep. So that's really nice. And the guys that we got, talk about live arms, Joe Milton is there. Spencer Rattler is there. And then you have a few other guys too, Sam Hartman, Carter Bradley, two experienced passers at the collegiate level, and obviously Nix, Penix, and then Pratt, as you mentioned. I think I got all of them. Yeah, I got all of them. But yeah, you mentioned you had some thoughts about Pratt. I know you.
I do. I want to bring up Milton real quick. I don't think that he's draftable. He's a really fun, big arm dude. I just remember back in the day when I was there watching Josh Allen, it was a red zone 7-on-7 drill, and he threw a ball harder than I think I've seen anybody ever throw a pass before. It sailed high, through the uprights, and about 17 rows deep at Lad Peoples Stadium. That's the type of scattershot accuracy you are going to see from Joe Milton at the Senior Bowl. It will be incredible to watch him throw the ball downfield, though. Not just because he has a massive arm, but because he can get so much trajectory on the football as well. He has a special arm.
Yeah. A lot of quarterbacks, like they'll sacrifice velocity for loft on those deep passes, but the guys with the rockets, they can maintain it well putting that loft on it. And you see that, it is something to, provide as a selling point for him. He's definitely got it.
I do. I do have thoughts on Michael Pratt. I went through 4 games of his this morning, and I asked Twitter for the games to go through, and I will go through the USC game last year, and I will go through UNT this year. I don't see it with him. And it's partially because what I do see are a lot of easy answers. There's a lot of easy answers in that offense, and it just doesn't really scream to me NFL level processor, NFL level ball placement, against tighter coverage. And especially when he has to get out on the move, rolling to his right. Now, rolling to his left is a little bit better, but rolling to his right, ball placement and the velocity on his ball just really isn't there. There's times where it just kind of dies right down. There's times where it kind of floats high and outside. I think that he's a fun quarterback, especially at the college level, but I just don't know if I see the tools that I would be comfortable with taking any day or any time before, round 5, 6, 7. Most likely for me, it's round 6 or round 7. Like, I know Spencer Rattler has his flaws, but I'm going to take the physical tools of Spencer Rattler 10 times out of 10 before I do it with Michael Pratt, just from the games that I watch. And with quarterbacks, it's the entire picture matters. How you played late matters. I watched a lot of his late games. I didn't love a lot of his late games. I wish I could have gotten to see him against Mississippi. Obviously, that didn't happen because he was injured, but I came away very unimpressed with his tape overall.
Yeah, for me, I was a little bit, I did like some of the operational things that I saw. He didn't grade in the elite tier in any category for me. And that's ultimately the balance that you need to kind of fine tune is like, this guy is not an elite physical talent. Like, I think he has above average arm strength sometimes, but it's far closer to average than elite, right? So you look at that. And then you wonder, does he have enough on the operational side to counteract that? I think there are very impressive glimpses of anticipation, window anticipation, using the arm elasticity that he has to kind of layer pace and touch on those kind of bucket throws on the boundary, right? Those cover 2 hole shots, right? So, those are there, I think. But I think, expanding on that and showing evaluators side by side. Again, I think that comparison aspect that the Senior Bowl provides is going to be very intriguing for him because you've got guys like Rattler and Milton and Penix and Nix, who I think all have superior arm talent off of our film evaluation. But can Pratt show that he has the ease of velocity generation, that zip side by side, and can he keep the offense on schedule with that too? So Pratt for me has always been an early day 3 guy, but I do think, this will be a good opportunity for him to maybe move the needle if he can prove that.
Yes.
If not, he probably settles into that range, which is fine, right? I think round 5 to round 7, maybe round 4, right? We saw Aiden O'Connell go round 4 this past year.
Yeah.
So I think that is kind of the range where teams start to consider a guy like Pratt. Like, hey, if I need a really good safety blanket, he's very tough. He's a very good competitor, right? He's very poised. I think those things, along with his baseline physical ability and operational ability, will help him there. So it'll be a good opportunity for him for sure. But I think this QB group, I think the main thing that you're going to be looking at, Rattler has a lot to gain, not just through the play, but through interviews as well. And then Nix and Penix, seeing them side by side, because those two guys for the entire cycle, it feels like they've been in that same tier. Like, where do we place these guys? We feel like they could crack round 1. Penix, it's a little more, complicated because of the injury history, but they're both talented. They're both experienced, both incredibly productive. Nix was very efficient this past year. It'll be fun to see those guys side by side.
Yeah, the one thing I don't want to be completely negative when it comes to Pratt. I did want to say that his deep ball accuracy, placement, touch, I felt was pretty outstanding. I watched him chuck probably 10 to 15 passes downfield, and I don't think there's something that QB school talks about all the time. It's the never in history balls, where they're just not even close, and there weren't any of those down the field, even when he was being pressured. And like you said, he is a tough guy. He can move a little bit. He's not the most athletic dude in the world, but I thought he was pretty creative within the pocket. And then knowing that there aren't answers, and then trying to just pick up what he can with his legs, and being smart about not taking poor hits either. The next person on here is somebody I have not watched. Offensive lineman. I'm not even going to.
I'm pretty sure it's
say his
Satawa Lamea from Utah. I think I'm in the ballpark at least. So
I think you are too.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to try to say, but then I felt before I even started to say it that my mouth was going crazy, so I decided just not to.
Yeah, I think real quick, I think
he's a guy.
Yeah, so we got a few guys that we wrote down here. I think Lamea. they had the measurements on the page. It was 6'4", around 320, and over 33-inch arms. I think 33 and a half, around there. So the dude is built well. He's got tackle and guard experience. He's one of those guys who's kind of in that day 3, early to mid day 3 range right now. I think he could really work his way into day 2 range with a good offseason. I think it starts with the Senior Bowl. I think you're looking at a guy who, that physical profile that he has, he got really good natural leverage, proportional length, and he's a pretty good athlete for his size. I think he's very explosive. I think you have enough lateral mobility, really easy leverage acquisition, staying square to his opponents and pass protection, really good combative hand usage. I think the force on his punches and the swats, he's got that for sure. And then at the same time too, that tackle guard experience. I think he's a guy who's going to line up against anyone in one-on-ones and really prove himself. So I'm really excited to see what he can do, because I think in particular, you've got a lot of riser potential there. I think this guard class is decent, right? You got Cooper Beebe, you've got Christian Haynes, but I don't think there's a whole lot of volume precluding a guy like Lamea from rising into day 2 if he performs the Senior Bowl. So I think he's got the physical talent to do it. I think he's got that tenacious edge to really prove himself and stand out in one-on-ones. So I'm excited to see what he can do. He was one name that I circled, and like out of this OL group, a lot of top end guys at the Senior Bowl, but I think this guy really has a chance to prove himself and kind of rise from anonymity.
Anonymity. Yeah,
I want to be able to say that name or say that word at the drop of a hat. I still can't yet. I got to practice that. I got to practice. I'll say it 10 times in a row after this podcast here.
The next one that you wrote down, and actually I'm going to let you take the next 3 because I haven't watched a single second of any of these guys yet, but I swear I am catching up. Offensive tackle Roger Rosengarten, running back Dylan Laube, and wide receiver Jacob Cowing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're catching up. I mean, I think at this rate, like I'll check with you in a week and you'll watch like graded like 1,000 prospects. So I gotta get going myself. But yeah, these are a few guys that kind of stood out to me too. Roger Rosengarten from Washington ended up declaring redshirt junior, 6'6", around 300. So a little bit lighter, and that shows up with lacking play strength. But I think athletically, he is really going to stand out. I think he's a super springy mover in short ranges, really effortless explosiveness, both laterally and vertically when attacking upfield. Really good recovery athleticism too. I think he's got great proportional length. I think all of the tools are there. I think the frame to build off of, the physical foundation, is really going to be appealing to NFL evaluators. He's a natural right tackle too. So, kind of after Talise Fuaga, you've got J.C. Latham, Tyler Guyton. But after that, there isn't a ton of depth at the right tackle spot. And I think Rosengarten could fill that in and be a day 2 guy. Dylan Laube from New Hampshire. This is a fun player, 5'10", 208. He is super fun as a runner. I mean, the dude is compact. He's kind of low to the ground, right? So he's got that natural leverage, really physical finisher, really good explosiveness and energy, stride frequencies, but he's a really good receiving threat too. And I think that's how he's going to distinguish himself in this game. In 2023, I believe he had 66 catches for over 600 yards, in addition to almost 1,000 rushing yards. So he is very versatile, very multifaceted, and I think he can perfectly fit the modern NFL within that realm. And then you got Jacob Cowing. He's going to be a size outlier. I think he measured in on the Senior Bowl graphic in the 150s range, right? So that is about as outlier as you can get, right? That's at the very front of the graph. But Tank Dell, we saw him last cycle, and he tore up defensive backs at the Senior Bowl with that route running ability, with that effortless short area twitch, that foot speed, the agility, and the sinking ability, the cutting ability, right? He can press upfield at 90 degrees and just boom, he's going left. You don't even know it. He's got the speed to, impact guys down the field. Really dynamic after the catch too. I think Jacob Cowing, he started his career at UTEP and he was very productive at UTEP. Then he comes to Arizona, was an absolute target funnel. I mean, you can scheme him rack touches. He's a very good route runner. He's very good extending beyond his frame for his size and making those high flying acrobatic catches. So I think Jacob Cowing, he's a spark plug, which is really solid play, even if he's a lot lighter, not a little lighter. But I think, he's got the route running ability and the physical tools to really thrive in that one-on-one setting. So a few guys that I'm very excited to see. I think our next one is Zach Frazier, and this is one that I think we can both weigh in on, because he suffered a late season injury. I can't remember what exactly it was. Maybe it was a knee or something, but I didn't think he was going to be able to play at the Senior Bowl. And then released a video earlier this week, like doing squats and stuff. Like, he's going to perform there. He's actually going to play.
These offensive linemen, and the guy played at West Virginia, so he's got to be cut from steel. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's just the way that it goes. And Zach Frazier, I mean, we thought he could fight for OC1 for quite a while. I mean, a great football player. With the injury, we were kind of wondering about that. But if he comes out here and he is healthy and he plays well, and offensive line is a little bit tough at these Senior Bowl practices and games, and we're going to get an opportunity to see him up against some of the best centers in this class as well, which is going to be exciting. But I think with somebody like Frazier, being able to be in those one-on-ones and to be able to show that he is healthy is going to be huge for him in this game, because like I said, we thought that he could be a legitimate OC1 type dude for a long time in this class.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the defensive tackle group that he's going to be going up against. Ruke Arororo. Oh, wow. That's rolling off the tongue now.
Absolutely
Let's go.
Crushed it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that. That was such a big dopamine rush. You have no idea. You got Tyler Davis, who's a very solid player from Clemson too. You got Byron Murphy II, which we'll get to him in a little bit with our matchups, because you mentioned a lot of, I think all of the top centers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jackson Powers Johnson, Cedric Van Pran, Graham Barton, who could be classified as such. All of them, man. So this is going to be a massive event for that position group. But going up against a guy like Byron Murphy II, Dwayne Carter, Marcus Harris from Auburn is a nice sleeper with good leverage, right? 6'2", 280, kind of that sawed off mold. You've got Darius Robinson, who's kind of a Danico Autry type. I love his upside at the next level. You've got other guys like Jordan Jefferson from LSU, Keith Randolph Jr., another really solid Illinois player, Michael Hall Jr., another very good player, Braden Fiskey, who eats nails for breakfast and is going to come at you with 150%. I mean, just this entire group is a lot of fun. Justin Ebowigbe from Alabama too. So, and then Jackson, obviously, Gabe Hall. Just going down the list here, but it's a lot of talent. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all you can say. It's so much. It's the absolute gauntlet. And I'm so glad that we get to see Zach Frazier take this through, all of the centers, but Frazier in particular, because he is such a sound player with his leverage, with his, timing, his awareness, and then he's a really good athlete. He's got great strength and power too. So, overall, people say center one, right? I think Powers Johnson, for me, edges him out right now, but I do think that conversation is still wide open, and this could be a big separator.
If you think that Barton is a center, would he be your center one?
He's my IOL one for sure. I think, it's tough, right? Because Powers Johnson is so good for his age. I think he's got a few things that he can iron out, but really solid player, really versatile. So I do IOL one because I wouldn't want to confine Graham Barton to center on day one. Yeah. Like if you have multiple needs, play him at guard if you want, play him at tackle, right? So I don't want to move him to center right off the bat. Just as a default, I want to keep him flexible until the very end, until I know where I want to put him. But Graham Barton is my IOL one. Center one, if you want to play him at center, I do think he is still that. But it's really close. I think Powers, Johnson, Frazier, they're right there with him as well. So it's going to be fun to see them all kind of side by side.
Two tight ends that I added to the list, Jaheim Bell and Theo Johnson. Two guys who... tight ends are always weird because I talk about this a lot. It's the top guys, JT Sanders and Brock Bowers. You look at guys like Kyle Pitts. You look at guys like Darren Waller or Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce. Like there are at the NFL level 5 to 7 guys who are like Mark Andrews, stud. But outside of that, it's like there's going to be guys that get you 450 to 700 yards and are decent blockers, and that's about it. But when I look at Jaheim Bell and Theo Johnson, I look at two guys who have the physical upside to be those guys who can get you 800 plus receiving yards and be a legitimate threat. And you're going to see Bell's name come up here a little bit later. But those two guys for me in a tight end class that is a little bit iffy outside of those top two, in my opinion. And obviously, I don't want to disrespect Ben Sinnott either.
Come on, man.
But I have not dove in on his tape yet. I've seen a lot of Jaheim Bell and a lot of Theo Johnson. And so for me, seeing those guys go up against these linebackers, go up against these safeties, and I think it's a decent safety group at the Senior Bowl as well, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun tight end group to kind of roll through. I think you've got a few trying to scroll to it. But yeah, you've got those guys in particular. You've got Jared Wiley from TCU, who I'm a big fan of, who I think could be a sleeper. Ben Sinnott, you mentioned. You got AJ Barner, who's a really good blocker in Michigan, but I think he's pretty athletic too. So, I think there's some guys that could kind of sort up the board in that position group, but I'm excited to see how they filter out. But I think Johnson and Bell, if you're pointing out those guys, I think in particular for the modern NFL, right? Jaheim Bell is a guy who took almost 200 carries at South Carolina in 2022, I think. So it's like you play him in
Yeah.
the H-back role, scheme rack touches to him. He's so explosive. And then Theo Johnson is another guy who's very explosive, really good contact balance too. So I think those are two guys where if you're thinking about the modern NFL, just scheming touches and kind of taking advantage of mismatches, athletic mismatches, those are two guys who really fit that really well.
My first introduction to Jaheim Bell was he was out wide, very left side. I can't remember who they were playing, but it was 2022. It was at South Carolina.
Yeah.
And he was playing wide receiver, and I was like, who is number 0?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, who is this guy? He's a big wide receiver. And then I saw him in an H-back, and then I saw him at tight end.
Yeah,
and then
I'm
like, yo, this dude isn't it? And it wasn't just he streaked down the field and legitimately stacked an SEC corner.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was nothing. I was like, this dude is a legitimate athlete. And then he kind of went to anonymity and
hey, there we go.
at Florida State. Because
Stop rubbing
he
it in,
had,
man. Stop rubbing it in.
Yeah, because he had another tight end on that roster who was listed as a wide receiver, but is really a tight end. And then Keon Coleman, who are two of the biggest passing threats in the country. So he kind of fell apart at Florida State a little bit. But
I thought you were talking about, I thought you were shading Coleman for a second tight end, and then I forgot Johnny Wilson existed.
No, Johnny Wilson exists, and he is massive. Braden Fiske, you've talked a lot about him. You talked a little bit about him earlier. Just give me a quick rant on how much you love him.
Yeah, quick rant on these next two because we can get into matchups and we want to get some Shrine Bowl later on.
Glass Eaters coming up.
Yeah, Glass Eaters coming up. But Braden Fiske, man, one thing, he gives 150%, right? So I think in these one-on-ones, if you give more energy than the other guy, if you're quicker off the snap, if you're more violent off the snap, that alone can really help you out. And I think Fiske is going to be the guy who has the most motor, the most unhinged motor at the Senior Bowl, and I'm really excited to see what that does to translate. Chris Braswell from Alabama was a late addition. But underclassmen are, able to show up there. And I think his speed to power, I mean, this dude can crunch the pocket with his explosiveness, his proportional length. And he's really good at building off of that with his hands too. I was actually really impressed for his age. He seems more proficient with that than I would expect. So I think he's a guy, especially in one-on-ones with that speed to power, to kind of create a little uncertainty in offensive linemen and then kind of capitalize on that. I think that's a really good combination to have. So another guy who I think could keep rising with that Senior Bowl. But let's get into the matchups. We have a few specific matchups that we...
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to just touch on Braswell real quick. A guy who, he kind of reminds me of a lighter version, smaller, lighter version, less athletic version. And none of this is to say that he is bad, but Montez Sweat. And I say that because Sweat was like 270 pounds and he ran a 4.3.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not hard to be smaller and less athletic. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a freak. But Braswell, like the way that he plays, he's a little bit stiffer, but he's, very, very good power player. And Braswell is the guy who he's going to see the field early and he's going to be productive because, like you said with Fiske, plays with his pants on fire. Matchups to watch: Jackson Powers Johnson versus Byron Murphy II. I don't think I've seen two guys towards the end of a college football season just absolutely explode onto the scene the way that these two guys have. Because JPJ kind of like came up early on, like, oh, this is somebody to watch. And Byron Murphy has always been in the picture with that Texas defensive line. But these are two guys who have risen on boards, or at least in the media side of things, very quickly towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. What are you most excited about with this particular matchup?
Yeah, not just that too. These were two guys who early on, like in October, November, I was watching them, right? And we didn't know if JPJ was going to declare, but like, hey, if this guy declares, like, it feels like that you always have those guys who are kind of in that 75-100 range to start, because obviously our perception is imperfect, right? It takes time to really kind of get up to gear on that. But, I was watching him early on and Byron Murphy and thinking like, these guys are in the 75-100 range right now. They could legit be mocked in the first round later on. I would not be surprised. And now here we are. Byron Murphy is my 22nd overall player. JPJ is right outside my top 35, right? So my top pure center. So it's definitely come to fruition with them. And I think what I'm looking forward to most for this matchup, I think both of these guys are super dense and compact and well leveraged. JPJ 6'3", 320, Byron Murphy 6'1", 308, 310. These dudes carry a lot of mass in their frames, but they carry it well, and I think they're both really explosive. Byron Murphy is, like a bolt of lightning off the snap for his size. He's got really hyperactive twitch, the torquing in his hands. But Powers Johnson too. I mean, you'll see Powers Johnson, he will anchor guys and then he'll channel torque through that anchor from his hips and knock guys off balance from that. So I think, just how combative, how proficient they are at channeling force from their hips to their arms to their hands and just shocking their opponents. It's like when a unstoppable force meets an immovable object here. So I'm really excited to see how those two guys go at it, because natural leverage, explosiveness, strength, power, physicality, all of those boxes are checked for each of these guys. So I think, they rotate offensive linemen and defensive linemen a lot. So I don't know how many times we'll see them one-on-one, but once you do, like, hey, circle that, lock in, let's see what we got here, because it's going to be can't miss.
Speaking of unstoppable forces and immovable objects, Talise Fuaga and Tyler Guyton against Latu. I'm super excited about this matchup because Latu is such a technician, and you want to see, like, he's explosive and he is bendy, like, he's got it all, but is he explosive enough to kind of outdo those freaks on the outside that we see at tackle? Fuaga and Guyton being two right tackles in this class. The ease of movement, the explosiveness that they have, and the technical prowess that both of these guys possess. I am so excited. I think this matchup and the next matchup that we're going to talk about are the two that I'm most excited about. And for me, I want to see the ceiling on Guyton going up against somebody like Latu.
That's the thing with Guyton, because I feel like both of these matchups will provide slightly different things. I think Talise Fuaga is the higher graded player for me. That'll be almost a blue chip matchup when these guys go up against it. Because Latu, like you said, super deep bag of pass rush moves. He's got incredible hand usage, incredible counter quickness, but then he's insanely bendy at 6'5", 265. People don't really talk about that as often as they should. I still don't think they do. This dude will finish at, almost 90 degrees around the apex, cornering, kind of flattening the arc, right? He's got that ability, which is such a good tool to finish reps and create sacks, turn pressures into sacks. So I love that part of his game. I think Talise Fuaga too, 6'6", 330, very good lateral mover, very, very athletic and quick out of his kick. Really good combative hand usage. I think the balance, the recovery athleticism, the ability to stay square and keep leverage and then just anchor and suffocate rushes. He's a dominating force. He really is. The run blocking, people talk about that and kind of put a spotlight on that, but in pass protection too, there is a lot to like. So I'm very excited to see that. And then Tyler Guyton too. I think for Guyton, what I want to see more from him is in team drills, the run blocking. Can you maintain your pad level, right? Can you drive power through? But as a pass protector, I think he's going to really win over evaluators, especially if he can win a few reps against Latu. That will be the gridiron for him, because he is very balanced out of his pass sets. For a guy who played defensive tackle 3 years ago, very, very advanced, more advanced than you would expect at, managing his pad level, getting out of his kick, right? Maintaining synergy with his hands and feet. And I think just the athleticism, the flexibility on top of that too, the length at 6'7", 325. This is a guy who's really going to awe people with how he can move with that size. And I think Latu will kind of be the difference. Like, we know you're athletic, we know you're talented, we know you've got length and power and stuff, but can you stop Latu one-on-one? That is the biggest question, because that's the proving ground right there. So I'm very excited to see if he can do that, because we've been seeing Guyton mocked in round one for a long time now, right? It's starting to get more and more. A good performance against a guy like Latu could really solidify that.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was watching Jordan Morgan this morning or yesterday morning, I can't remember which day it was, but Latu's gravity is insane. Yeah, because they're on opposite sides. I'm watching Jordan Morgan playing left tackle, and Latu is rushing from the opposite side, and I can't help but watch him. He's so aesthetically pleasing as a pass rusher. The next one I want to talk about, cornerbacks, Ennis Rakestraw and Quinyon Mitchell versus, but literally just pick any wide receiver. It doesn't matter. This class is ridiculous, and the Senior Bowl class is ridiculous. But I watched Ennis Rakestraw this morning for the first time ever. I never watched a single snap of him. I just saw Mel Kiper talking about him the other day, and I saw a little bit on him, about him on Twitter. And this dude, for me, came out of nowhere. Obviously, a fantastic football player. I'm very excited to watch him in the 1v1s.
Yeah, he translates perfectly to 1v1s because I think that man coverage ability is really where he thrives, right? The foot speed, the physicality, not giving up any space, right? The fluidity and the timing with his transitions upfield. Just a guy who's just a competitor, ultimate competitor, right? I think the vertical speed for me will be the biggest question. Once he gets kind of in that adjacent plane with the guy moving upfield, can he avoid being stacked? Because I think we saw that enough at the college level, but you look at some of the elite speed threats that are going to be there, right? I think Xavier Leggett, right? I think Malachi Corley. You look at Jaquan Jackson from Tulane, right? I think Ricky Pearsall's got some speed to him as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got guys like who else? Devontae Walker as well. I think Roman
Yeah.
Wilson. A lot of speed threats that could test that, right? So if Rakestraw can stay composed in man coverage, and if he has enough speed, that's going to be the biggest thing to watch with him. But I agree. He's a very good player. I watched Abrams Drain first, and then I watched Rakestraw, and it's like, dude, this guy can really man guys up, and he's got really sticky coverage ability, very good physicality, the chippy competitive mentality too. So you love to see that. And then you got Quinyon Mitchell here too, which I think for a different reason is going to be a really fun watch. The talent being from a MAC school is really impressive, but the ball production, the ability to play the ball through the catch point, I think he's very good at getting into proper positioning with that speed, that positioning, that kind of spatial feel. And then once he is there, he's very good at converting as well. So two guys who I think against any wide receiver, right, in this wide receiver class, is the perfect testing ground for that. Let's get in real quick. Most to gain. We've got two players listed. Jaheim Bell for you, and then a FCS guy for me. Jaheim Bell, most to gain. Why is that?
1v1s. Yeah. 1v1s, what he's able to do against those safeties and linebackers and to show off his athleticism.
And then for me, Willie Drew from Virginia State is a guy I want to mention. He had incredible ball production, 6 interceptions and 22 pass breakups this past year. Around 6 foot, 185, so a little bit leaner. But from what I saw, the limited tape I could muster, looks like a really explosive mover. I think for any FCS prospect, the Senior Bowl is a great proving ground to kind of prove you belong on the same stage as these guys athletically, right? But the ball skills, the physicality, the proactive competitive mentality at the catch point, authoritative, none of that is in question. So I think Willie Drew, he's a guy that, not a lot of people know right now, but I think this is an opportunity for him to change that. With that, let's get into the Shrine Bowl because there's a lot more prospects there that kind of fall under the radar, but it's still a quality roster. I really like the team that they put together. We've got a few guys that we have to watch. If you want to start with any of the ones that you put down first, and then we can transition to my guys, because I know I've got a couple obvious ones. Blake Watson, of course. I mean, if you've listened to the podcast, I've mentioned him a couple times. But there's a few fun ones. I know you got the Janky twins there. Tell me a little bit about the guys that you're looking forward to seeing at the Shrine Bowl. Yeah,
so the Janky twins, just because I haven't really seen much of their tape so far, so I'm excited to just see them. And then Malik Washington, Virginia, I'm really excited to see him. I think that he's a really good player, and seeing him at Shrine is going to be interesting. You added Jonah Ellis. I didn't even see Jonah Ellis on the roster. So
he actually just got added today. That was a buzzer beater for me.
I mean, the production of Jonah Ellis is historic pretty much. And he has, I believe, 3 brothers in the NFL. He's an NFL player. He's going to play on Sundays. The one that I'm excited about that you have here is Jason Bean, and you have him listed as a quarterback, and he might play quarterback, but that dude as an athlete is a freak.
Yeah.
And it would not surprise me at all if NFL teams asked him, hey, can you run some routes for us? Because he is that athletic. And to be honest, as a quarterback, probably not going to be that guy at the next level.
Yeah. And, it's kind of it's an interesting separation because not going to be that guy, probably not. But can he be a quality backup with that athletic talent? I'm of the mind he can. Athletic talent is something I really value in backups. Guys who can kind of create under pressure, create new opportunities for themselves and withstand adversity. I think that athleticism really helps him to do that. But you mentioned it. He's a freak. I think he hit over 22 miles an hour at one point. He's going to, I think, he'll measure in a little closer to like 6'1", 6'2", 180, 190. He's a pretty lean dude, but he is insanely explosive. He's flexible. But watching some of his QB tape, I watched him against Texas the most, and I think that game, obviously that Texas defense, the defensive line is so good. They're going to kind of get some bad plays out of you. But I was actually really impressed with some of the flashes I saw of break anticipation, of leverage awareness, throwing away from the DB leverage and man coverage, sliding in the pocket to evade pressure, right? This is a guy who has that athleticism, but doesn't rely on it to a fault. He's not bailing the pocket prematurely super often. I think the biggest ways that he can improve is mechanics and accuracy. But I think you're looking at a guy who has a ton of talent. I mean, just dripping with talent, and then has enough pocket discipline, enough processing ability, right, to potentially be a quality backup. So I'm really intrigued. I think there's a big void. We mentioned Michael Pratt, probably more of a day 3 guy, right? I think after that top QB group, there's a big void with guys who can go on early day 3 and be a quality backup, a quality rotational guy right off the bat. So I think Jason Bean, to me, I know he's very talented. I know you could play him at wide receiver, and he'd actually probably be a pretty solid investment there. But I also think if you need a backup quarterback who has the talent to withstand adversity in spurts, right? I think this guy is near the top of the list for me. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him gain a little more respect in that regard, because I think there is actually something there.
All right. And then do you just want to talk about Blake Watson for a minute or two?
Let's just do it. I'll try to keep it to a minute or two and not 5 minutes, because we are running out of time here. But Blake Watson, I've been a big fan of his for a while. Started his career at Old Dominion and finished it at Memphis. But super, really quick. I mean, versatile player, again, around 5'9", almost 200 pounds, really good contact balance. Not the most explosive runner, not great speed, but I think between the tackles, right, in congested areas, very agile, very fluid hips, very good creative instincts and vision. And then at the end of the day, too, the route running ability. He can split out wide. He can play in the slot. He can run routes. He's got a very full route tree and a very good receiver beyond his frame as well. So we go back to Dylan Law. I think Law might be a little more explosive, definitely a little bigger. But I think Watson is a really good option late on day 3 if you're looking for a guy who can come in right away and be utilized in a lot of different ways and kind of provide that change of pace as a runner. So big fan of his. A couple more that I've got down here. Jamari Chroma, defensive lineman from, I think, James Madison. This dude is going to measure very well. I think he's around 6'4", 270, 280. He's got really long levers for arms, really positionally versatile, and produced at a massive clip this past year. Good explosiveness, good flexibility for his size. One of those all-encompassing defensive chess pieces on the line, who I think has the power element to drive the pocket, kind of push blockers back and kind of cave in for quarterbacks and make life difficult for them. Another one, Jarius Monroe, cornerback from Tulane, 6'2", over 200, really good size, explosiveness player. I think watching him on film, you see him trigger downhill and run plays and, short completions, and he's got legitimate burst in his shoes. He's really, really high energy player for his size, really competitive, really physical at the catch point and in support, right? So I think a guy who's got some coverage variability to him as well, can play zone, can play a little bit of man. I'm curious to see what he does at the game. And then I got Jonah Ellis as well. I feel like we just got to mention him again because you mentioned it. He's got some NFL lineage. I think Caden Ellis was for the Falcons, a linebacker this past year. So yes, Jonah Ellis is around 6'2", 245, 250. Really good proportional length, really good bend and burst in active hand usage. I think for me personally, he could be a day 2 guy just with his ability to win around the arc. He's explosive enough for sure. But I think this could be a good opportunity for him to kind of prove that he can dominate in one-on-ones, because the Shrine Bowl offensive tackle group isn't quite as high level as the Senior Bowl one. So I think looking at that aspect of it, there's a big opportunity for Jonah Ellis to come in and say, like, hey, I am that guy. So I'm excited to see what he does there. And then we got matchups to watch for the Shrine Bowl. Any of these, we got a few listed. Any of these stand out to you in particular? I know there's a few top end guys on the roster who could, it depends on if they play. We don't know if they're going to play. Last year, Zay Flowers played for a little bit, but sometimes guys kind of sit out and just take interviews. But let's operate with the assumption that they could. Who's kind of catching your eye here?
Yeah, for me, I have 2 matchups here. Edge rusher Xavier Thomas versus offensive tackle Caden Wallace from Penn State. Mostly just because Xavier Thomas was such a highly rated recruit. He was the number 4 or 5 recruit in the nation back in 2018. It seems like forever ago. But if he can show why he was that, it will be very interesting. And then tight ends, McAllen Castles from Tennessee, and then obviously JT Sanders going up against linebacker Edgerrin Cooper in 1v1s. That's what I'm excited about.
I like that a lot, man. Edgerrin Cooper, that athleticism, but McAllen Castles too, back to his days at UC Davis. I think he's a very smooth athlete. I think we saw that in flashes at Tennessee. Definitely a guy who I think is a big sleeper in this class. So my 2 matchups very quickly. And again, it depends on if they play. But Christian Mahogany, guard from Boston College, versus defensive tackle Leonard Taylor III. Don't know if Taylor is going to play because he's potentially a first-round guy. Maybe he just wants to do interviews and preserve his health. But super explosive. I think at 3-tech in particular, you're looking at a guy who can win quickly, win violently, right? He's got that strength to him, that lean strength as a 6'3", 305-pound guy. Super explosive, super agile as well. And then Christian Mahogany, just a road grader, just a 6'3", 320-pound block of rock, right? So I'm really excited to see that one. And then you got Malik Washington. I think against any corner is going to be very fun because he's a really good route runner. He's a really good conversion threat over the middle of the field. But Bernardo Green is one for me who should get a little more credence here because he's really, I think he's athletic enough. I think he's got good size. He had 11 pass deflections for Florida State this past year. Really good man coverage guy. He will smother you. He will compete at the catch point and in man and press man. So very excited to see that one. But overall, I think both rosters, the moral of the story is don't look away because there's a lot of talent to take in this coming week.
There is going to be so much talk, so much hype around these two games this upcoming week. I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited to get back and maybe talk about some of the stuff that we saw from the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl. We don't know how much of it we're going to be able to see, but I am so excited to continue talking about draft prospects this year. And that's all we got. We got to get out of here. As always, guys, remember that I love you. Goodbye.